Hey, welcome to the Dr. Luke channel. You'll notice the panel for today is slightly different in two ways, distinctly. We have our good friend Kelly, who is, for today, Jackie O. And if you can believe it, I am JFK because I'm wearing the crown and a tie. And below me here is the lovely producer Jordan as Blackjack, the riderless horse in JFK's funeral procession. Welcome, ladies.
Hello,
Thank you.
hello. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
It's my pleasure. I'm very happy to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you. So today we are going to be talking about chapter 28 still. We're going to be looking at the last four sections: death and resurrection of Bunko, death and revival of vegetation, uh, analogous rites in India. Sorry, I need my glasses, and the magic spring. Okay. These are not revolutionary departures from a lot of the things that we've talked about so far in previous Golden Bough episodes, largely with the death and resurrection of the vegetative spirit that is connected to the king, and the softening of the regicide ritual by having avatars and effigies and things of that nature. And we'll get to that in a minute. The way that I have set up the discussion for us today, initially, I like to warm up sometimes because synchronicity is a big part of our conversations here. Had a couple synchronicities, and then that actually led to some profound insights. So unlike previous presentations that I put together, I thematically we're going to have some analysis of some synchronicities that we've had since last podcast, some connection to deeper themes. Then we're going to get into the Golden Bough material, and then we're going to go into some of the work from my book. That'll be the last third. So I hope that is not too disruptive, and you ladies don't mind me going through the title card here in a moment.
Not one bit.
Okay. So if you are interested in the way that we've laid things out here, and for those who may never have seen an episode of this Golden Bough podcast, and it's been emergent, it has evolved this way. I did not necessarily think it was going to take the form when I started this in the very first podcast. I don't know, it's almost a year ago that we started. But this has been a great fuel for the fire of my book project, which is largely a archetypal psychohistory of the United States space program, specifically the Apollo missions. But as we've gone along, it's gotten more expansive, and now I'm looking all the way to the current Artemis mission and all the way back to the Trinity test as being fair game for the subject of my book. But some of the subjects we're going to talk about today, in addition to the contents of the Golden Bough, let's see. We'll start off. One of my favorite things right now is Gilmore Girls. I've been watching a lot of Gilmore Girls, and I'm finding some synchronicities in it that mirror back some of the concepts that we talk about here. And in one particular episode, some themes that connect to Marilyn Monroe and the King Arthur story came up. So we're going to be looking at that specifically when we talk about Camelot and who the characters might be in the Kennedy administration, specifically Lancelot, Arthur, and Guinevere. We are going to be looking deeper into Earth Day. One of the things that we talked about last time is the ecological spirit that was born out of the Apollo missions, and how this in some way parallels some of the vegetative rites that we see in the Golden Bough. I looked deeper into the Gaia hypothesis, who came up with the Gaia hypothesis, who named it, and I think we will find some really interesting material there. This is, in a weird way, connected to the Lord of the Flies, which you see, there's a clip from the old movie and a reference to it in The Simpsons. We will also be looking at the potential fate of the Artemis mission. I don't think anyone really contends that archetypal psychohistory is predictive in any way, but I'm seeing some patterns of concern with some of the naming conventions that are involved in the Artemis conventions, and it's got me a little bit concerned about whether, what's going to happen in that mission. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then probably one of the more interesting finds that I came up with this past week is this photo here in the bottom left-hand corner of JFK and I believe it's a general, where they're looking at different weapons. And the reason why this was so interesting to me is that the general there is holding a crossbow. And last time we touched on this, that there seems to be this theme of archery through all these archetypal psychohistory events, whether it be the Trinity test, whether it be the Cuban Missile Crisis, Apollo, Artemis. Archery, archery, archery. Something about the reality is screaming archery to us. And I want to get into what that might mean. So these are going to be largely the subjects we're going to talk about today. It's really just a glimpse of much more to come. So that's what we'll be doing.
Yes.
You ready to
Please.
go?
Yeah,
Ready to get
let's
started?
do it.
I love the enthusiasm.
I'm just struck with all of the content.
Yeah, it is a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot. That's why I give you some heads up of it, so that it's not so beguiling when you experience it. So let's go to the first slide, 620,
hmm
if we can. So I have I have been detecting that there is there's something very solar that seems to be descending upon Donald Trump at the moment. And this is interesting because of the return pressures in the solar hero figure that we've examined in regards to JFK. And now I'm seeing it in Donald Trump here on the left-hand side. You can see him and Melania on New Year's Eve. And I was struck by this with how celestial and lunar she looks in her silvery dress. And again, as Donald often does, is associate himself with Apollo here, very Apollonian looking. And shortly there, and I put this in our chat, I was like, there's something strange in a solar way happening with Trump right now. And then shortly after that, this image of him coming out of a helicopter was taken. And apparently, if you see this, the over here on the right, he's almost completely whited out. I guess the mechanism for this is that he's been hit by the flash of a camera and someone's caught it at the perfect time. He almost looks like he's becoming a light being emitting energy. It's very strange. And we talked about with the JFK, with some of the things that we've looked at with the JFK presentation. Last time we looked at the timing of the JFK assassination, how he was struck down at high noon in Dealey Plaza. And we also looked at the symbolism of Trump tagging his name with the Kennedy Center and what that might mean. And to my surprise, while we were doing the presentation last time, I guess somewhat last minute, the staff at the Trump Kennedy Center decided to run an old Western called High Noon. And that felt very uncanny to me, given the fact that we talked so much about the significance of the astrology of High Noon on November 22nd, 1963. But as I thought more about it, this is not the first time that Trump has had the solar imagery associated with him. Going back to the first administration, when we had the eclipse, he stares right at the sun without the glasses. This seems to be a pretty important symbolism. Sunglasses, as Kelly has picked up on here with wearing her Jackie O glasses. And when he looked at the sun and talked about being the chosen one, I think it's pretty uncanny, because I'm seeing this all sort of happen at the same time that a lot of this QAnon information seems to be tracking with our unfolding reality at the moment. And the QAnon stuff is like associated with in conspiracy theory circles with the return of JFK or JFK Jr. So uh, I don't know exactly what's going on here. I'm just kind of reporting the synchronicity and what I'm seeing. There's something solar descending upon this man right at the moment. I find it interesting that it's timed with the world events.
This photo is so fun.
Which one?
The reflective one.
Where the one where he's the illuminated.
Yeah.
Something I meant to talk about last time, and I think it concerns me. It concerns me is like JFK as a solar figure. We have an assassination event associated with Trump. It seems that assassination event is somehow archetypally, at least with JFK, was associated with the success of the Apollo missions. I'm wondering, because the assassination attempt did not, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, what this means for Artemis. There's a lot of, we've talked about this, that a lot of it seems like what's going on with the Apollo programs is something about the alchemical marriage, the unification of solar and lunar principles, and that somehow that these have like terrestrial archetypes or avatars on Earth that are necessary for this completion, specifically with JFK and Maryland. But we see here that Trump is spared, and I wonder if that does not bode well for the success of the Artemis mission, which I found out. I guess they're planning on landing on the moon in September of this year. I guess they have a flyby or something like that in a couple weeks or maybe a month here. So that, in addition to the fact that there isn't really this alchemical union going on with the Artemis mission, unlike there was with the Apollo, this has given me pause, given that we've seen that there might be, gosh, I sound so crazy, there might be something connected about the assassination events to these lunar missions. So, and then I kind of went deeper into that. So, Jordan, if you could go to the next slide, please. Unless, Kelly, do you want to? I'm kind of going a mile a minute here. If you want to throw something in here real quick.
The only thing that I wanted to say, I find it really interesting. If you look closely at the picture on New Year's Eve, there is a blurry-faced figure playing the violin in between Donald and Melania.
Yes.
I just think that's interesting.
Yes, that is incredibly interesting, because that conjures images of playing the violin while Rome is burning, right, and the connections to Nero and whatnot. I see it now. Until you pointed that out to me, I was unable to see that.
It's also another bow.
It is another bow, and it does connect Apollo to music as well. You know, Apollo plays the lyre. So he is a god of music and prophecy and poetry, which we looked at last time, his connection to the muses. So this is that's an excellent observation, Kelly. I really appreciate, or Jackie, I should say. That's great that you picked that out. So I don't know how this image of Trump is like a light being. Like I've never really seen a photo like this before. Like I've seen people kind of get whited out by a flash, but nothing like this. This is, I don't know. This is bizarre. This is totally bizarre. So, damn. So I want to go a little deeper into the Artemis symbolism if we can. So because I have growing concern about the symbolism associated with the Artemis mission, I went and I kind of dug into Artemis mythology. I've not really made it my focus because it's been about Apollo, but it's inescapable. I can't really talk about these things without talking about Artemis right now. So like many things, I'm reluctantly forced to do so. And one of the things I've learned about Artemis just from the review that I did prior to this presentation is that Artemis is kind of an eternal maiden, which is problematic if we do see that these moon landings are somehow connected to fertility and vegetation rituals. The fact that she fiercely protects and guards her maidenhood, her virginity. And if we see, and this, you know, you have to go back to a lot of the episodes that we've done previously, that there's something about the production of the Philosopher's Stone through the marriage of these different solar and lunar principles. If she is constantly protecting her virginity, can this conception happen in outer space like Apollo seems to be about? And I dug a little deeper into it. One of the reasons why she is an eternal maiden, and there are several different myths that are connected to this, but I'm only going to dwell on the Orion myth. And I knew about this, and it snapped into my perception, my consciousness. I was like, okay, this is a big deal. The capsule that they will have atop of the SLS rocket that will land on the moon is named Orion. That is, I would say that is a potentially an ominous choice for the capsule that is supposed to land on the moon. And the reason for this is that in mythology, Orion dies in two different ways. One way is indirectly through Artemis herself. Apollo is very jealous of the relationship that Orion starts to develop with Artemis. So he tricks Artemis and says, oh, look at that speck out at sea. Can you shoot it for me? And she's also an archer. This gets back to our archery themes. And she goes and she shoots this thing that Apollo asks her to shoot, not knowing that it is in fact Orion. So she ends up killing the one lover that she was allowing to get close to her. So we have her unwillingly, we have her maidenhood preserved. It's incredibly tragic. The other way that Orion dies prematurely is that he's very boastful, and Gaia, okay, we're going to look at this in a second. Gaia, the earth goddess, who is connected to the ecology movement, sprung forward from the Apollo missions, right? The Gaia hypothesis, which we'll look at later in the presentation, Gaia herself sends a scorpion to kill Orion. So from two different angles, we have Orion meeting an early demise. So when I look at this symbolically, this seems problematic for the fate of the Artemis program. I could be completely wrong. I could be completely wrong. I'm not in the prediction business, but I'm just looking at the pattern, and it's a very strange one to me. Ladies?
I mean, it's definitely within the realm of possibility.
Right. I mean, a big part of this is that, we've had tragedy associated with the space program off and on, right? Like, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there was the Apollo 1 fire. The very first capsule that they had for the Apollo missions was incinerated, and that has all sorts of interesting symbolism to it, right? Apollo 13 almost was it was a failure in terms of being unable to land on the moon, and there were reasons to think, right? Like it was associated with the number 13. Like in retrospect, like, and it wasn't just that it was named 13. It was like it launched on like April 13th and at the 13th hour and all this weird stuff. When you have like 713 stack up like that, and you start to see the reality as like a kind of like a living organism that we can consciously interact with, you start to think, maybe it's not the best idea to line things up like this. And not to mention the Challenger disaster and Columbia. So, I don't want to say we're due, but there is a lot of precedent for space tragedy here, and I don't like that this capsule is named Orion.
This has me wondering too, does the flavor of the symbol depend on the context that it's used in? Whether a culture uses 13 as a positive number or a negative number. Like 44 is one that I know is used somewhat nefariously, but also to other people has a really positive connotation. So I'm curious, when these things get encoded in, is the frequency, maybe the dimension of the frequency being used kind of intersects
Yeah,
with the frequency of the people using it?
Yeah. I mean, the 13 is not necessarily like profoundly unlucky. We've looked at it from a Jungian perspective, and the numinosity of 13 being a completion of a cycle as well. Right. And beginning of something new. So
which
it's
often
not,
ends with destruction of something old, but not
yeah. So it's not one-sided, like, oh, that number is evil. There's a lot of nuance in it, like you're pointing out. So anyway, and like I said, I haven't been following the Artemis mission. I believe the one that they're doing in February is like Artemis 2. I don't know exactly what the plan is for the one. I should have looked deeper into this, but the one that they have supposedly landing in September is I don't know what iteration of this will be. I think the leader of that mission, the first person, supposedly the first woman on the moon, the captain, is this woman named Christina Koch or something like that. So that obviously is very interesting because the name Christina is connected to Christ. And I haven't done a deeper etymological dive into it, but I suspect I will now that I'm talking about it. So.
Oh, we also have the O's. I don't know, Jackie O.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything there.
Yeah. No. Maybe I don't know a lot. I mean, the thing is about Orion is when and perhaps it's not an evil sign. There's you could if the mission is successful and nothing bad happens to the Orion capsule, you know, the way that Orion gets immortalized in the stars is that through this death, he is then uh, I don't want to say, I don't know if resurrected is the right word. He's given an apotheosis and placed in the stars, and that's why we have his constellation. Is that after he's killed, he's brought up to the stars. I'm not exactly sure on the particulars who does that, but that's how he undergoes the apotheosis. So perhaps it has more to do with consciousness and a rejuvenation, and maybe there's a temporary setback, but ultimately the end is achieved. But again, the fact that Orion meets these untimely demises would be concerning to me. Okay. All right. I'm just superstitious. I should have been born in the 13th century. Okay. Let's go to slide 622. Okay. This was beyond interesting to me. We have talked a lot about the Apollo missions being about creating the Philosopher's Stone. And when I was doing a little bit of research on Orion, I saw that one of his names is like the three fathered one or something like this. I was like, what are we talking about? Like, what is this? Like, I don't know who made Orion or who made um, a lot of these different gods and demigods. And it turns out there are different traditions, but Orion is not the result of like normal binary reproduction. He is supposedly the result, depending on the tradition. I think one tradition has it as Jupiter, Vulcan, and Mercury, and another has it. I don't know, but the point of the matter is that he is associated with the Philosopher's Stone, which would seem to some way give confirmation to this idea that we've been talking about, the solar and lunar principles uniting in the Apollo missions. So you can see this here from um, Wikipedia. There's several images that have been used to represent the Filius Philosophorum. Among these are the transformed hermaphroditic Hermes, which we've looked at, right? The child of the Red King and the White Queen, we have talked about that extensively in prior episodes. The child of the egg and the three fathered Orion. So how crazy is that? Like, I feel like that in some way is vindication about a lot of the things that we've done, that we have the Apollo missions, they go away, we fire up the moon landing missions again. Oh, and what are we gonna involve in that? Orion, who is synonymous with the Philosopher's Stone, which I had no idea about. And then we're gonna bring back Artemis as well. So that seems to me to be some sort of confirmation of the alchemy that we've been witnessing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super fun. I like it. The
Um,
Moonchild, we talked about
ex-
Crowley's Moonchild a long time ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, um, something that I have wondered, because if the Philosopher's Stone is somehow connected to a form of consciousness, and if the choice of the Orion title is is not a good one,
Mhm.
does that mean that type of consciousness that was introduced through the blue marble, through the overview effect, through the totality of the Earth viewed from space, if that is not achieved with the Artemis program, does it go away? Is that Philosopher's Stone, whatever it may be, destroyed?
Mm. This seems a lot deeper than what I am probably prepared to say. Like, the symbol of the philosopher's child seems as multi-layered as the symbol of the Grail. I wouldn't assume that the material, quote, failure of it would, what if that just spreads it? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm gonna look like a total idiot. I mean, I'll look like freaking Nostradamus if I get it right, but like chances are I'm gonna get it wrong. Like chances are I'm gonna look really stupid for saying all of this, but
well, we'll
uh,
see. And
yeah,
I think just, I mean, my perspective on most divination is there's different octaves that these archetypal patterns of the unus mundus can occur. So it's even if you're seeing this archetypal arc, it doesn't necessarily mean that transformation is going to happen in the exact way that your human brain is filling in, even if that cycle is still in play.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the research I've done on this, the archetypes where Young and others did not think there was any predictive quality to them. But
Right.
I just wonder if that, you know, I love Young, but he's really obsessed, at least early on in his career, with looking
S-
respectable
Right.
and
Right.
intelligent and passing himself off as a scientist. I guess later on in his life, he's like, ah, screw it.
Hmm.
But um, I wonder, I wonder if he um, sabotaged himself. And I don't know, you know, he didn't. I think we've at some point we've looked at the divination experiments that he was doing with tarot cards briefly when we were looking at blackjack. Maybe last episode or 2 episodes ago.
Hmm.
I'm not exactly sure if he felt like they were productive. I don't know how much time he had to go into them because I think it was
Well,
towards the end of his life.
when you're doing something based off of a process of stepping out of linear time and then you try to use a linear time based quote scientific method to evaluate, like, they're just completely incompatible systems in my view. They're talking about completely different dimensions of reality, so they don't really, I don't think it goes anywhere, right? I see a lot of projects like that. Many people have done a lot of empirical analysis regarding astrology more so than tarot. And you
Mm,
can find correlation. Like, you can find things, but to me, there's a bigger methodological problem with trying to shoehorn these things into systems that are like clearly beyond
yeah.
the the materially, like, physically observable reality. You did get the election right. I think there's something to this. I think every
I've been able to yeah, you're reminding me. I had a good run there where I was able to get some boxing matches and the election and some football games right with this stuff.
when it
That's
shows
true.
itself, it shows itself. I don't think you can really force it, if that makes sense. And we all project our own distortions onto the things we see or fill in the gaps with what our brain recognizes as patterns of the past or things that we hope to see. So that's always a problem too. Like with the
Yeah,
Super Bowl, you saw a story arc in play and then it wasn't really in play anymore because we had a new set of archetypes
yeah,
emerge.
yeah.
And so you kind of have to adjust. So, but I think it's just as valid of a way of playing with predictions as any other. I don't think it's inherently like more flawed than, I don't know.
I don't know. I've never really done a statistical analysis of the different ways to do predictions, and I'm not really sure this is a form of divination. I mean, I'm not like it's just what I'm seeing. I mean, if the reality itself has a certain sort of archetypal syntax to it,
Right.
then and if there are certain grooves that humanity and events slot themselves into, in one sense, you could start to anticipate outcomes. But unlike when I've like made predictions about football games or elections or something like that, like the outcomes are like often binary, right?
Sure.
Someone
This is
wins,
less
someone
binary.
loses. Like it's like, well, this could mean anything. Like this could mean like, there's something super tragic that happens. This could mean that like a rocket gets grounded. This could mean, this could be this could be nothing. This could it. So there's a lot more that could go wrong here.
That's so
I don't know.
true. I mean, when
Uh,
Kamala the elephant dies right before election day, that one's pretty easy to
I don't. Yeah, I don't
interpret.
think. Yeah, I don't think you really have to be a super genius at this stuff when you see things like that, or when the squirrel runs across the stage
Yeah.
at the Trump rally or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think this is more open-ended, but it's interesting. We get a front row seats to another space cycle. They've been talking
Yeah,
about Mars and all these things for years now. So
yeah.
it's interesting that we're going to see a ramp up in what I think is more like quote true
Mm-hmm.
NASA moon missions. Because a lot of the stuff they've been doing, I don't think captures the attention of most people. Whereas,
That barely catches my attention. I
yeah,
was pretty much uninterested in Artemis. I decided to look a little bit more at it because we were looking at the moon trees last week and how I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense in terms of like the spreading of the vegetative spirit, the renewal of the vegetative spirit. And the they planted some moon trees recently at the Trump Kennedy Center, but they're from the Artemis missions because they've started that back up where they're taking the seeds into outer space and replanting them. So you would think they would make a bigger deal about that, like even I find that the moon tree thing is like something that like space historians, uh, it's not, I don't feel like that's something that's widely known. And if that was like if ecology was a big part of the missions, you feel like that would be trumpeted a lot more. I want to go into the King Arthur stuff. But before we do that, Kelly, do you have anything else to say before we close out that section?
Well, I'm kind of stuck on, I didn't know that Orion was three-fathered. And I'm just sort of playing
Yeah.
with that in my mind and how the symbology of his three fathers might kind of play into the Orion mission that you were talking about. So, um,
I
just a very preliminary thought about that.
I think that's something I'll look into and try to take it up next time. Like you said, there's different sets of fathers that are given to it. I believe Mercury is one of the constants, which is also intriguing because we had the Mercury program that started the whole space race to begin with, at least on the American side. So I think in one set it's Jupiter, Vulcan, and Mercury, and then another it might be. Jordan, I don't know if you want to pull it up. Could you pull it up for us? Just out of curiosity.
what exactly do you want?
The three-fathered nature of
Yeah.
Orion.
Yeah, it was something I was gonna dive into after this, so it's great if Jordan pulls it up and we can get a little glimpse.
Yeah. By the way, it's pretty NC-17 as far as how three fathers made Orion. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to. Well, I guess we could talk about it. I mean, it's an educational channel. But from the AI overview that I have, the three-fathered nature of Orion refers to a specific, less common Greek myth where Zeus, Poseidon, and Hermes, Mercury, urinated or into a bull's hide, which was then buried and from which Orion was born, making him the son of three gods. This contrasts with the more common myth where Orion is the son of Poseidon and the Gorgon Uriel. Both the three god version explains his connection to Earth and his name linked to urine, water. So it's pretty disgusting, to be
So
honest.
it has the 3 element nature, which you said.
Yeah.
You have an air, a water, and a fire. So you have Apollo. Oh, you have all these different configurations, but they seem to be following like this trinity of the elements into like combining, I guess, into a super element, which
Interesting.
it is very alchemical. Um, yeah, I'm struggling to
deeper
find
into
stuff
it.
like on the fly that's super deep beyond what you just
Yeah.
said, but I think bulls are
Yeah.
super significant.
Yep.
We have like
You
the
have Jupiter and Neptune, right, with Poseidon.
yes. So
Zeus, Poseidon, and Hermes.
sorry,
which
I was
is
getting tripped up because like that's mixing the different systems, if you will. But yes, so it's like
yeah,
Zeus, Poseidon are the same Marvel universe, if you will. Jupiter, Neptune are the same DC
yeah,
universe, if you will.
yeah.
But they're more or less the same energies. Yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
for
super
pulling that
interesting.
up.
Yeah, I'll look deeper into it. Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's look at King Arthur a little bit. By the way, so Jordan and I watched Excalibur, the 1981 Excalibur. Kelly, were you familiar with this movie?
No.
It's like free on YouTube. Apparently,
Yeah.
it is the richest distillation of all the Arthurian legend from Mallory. Not that I think it's like this high cinematic event, but for someone who is strapped for time in terms of like consuming information, I don't really have time to go through all of Arthurian legend at the moment. But it did illuminate some things because I realized that there were things that I should have been aware of that I was not aware of. Um, and the reason why I got down this whole pathway is that I had a bit of a synchronicity with the Gilmore Girls, like I mentioned at the outro, where uh, in the scene, it's an episode really about Proust. Proust is in the background, but there's also a conversation within it about um, about Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller and their psychosexual dynamics. Right, the girls in the classroom are essentially talking about how dumb girls want hot guy or smart guys or something like that. And she was talking about this in terms of Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller, but as you know, it's clearly Marilyn Monroe was a voracious reader, or she was just performatively reading all the time, was never actually reading, which is interesting because the episode on Proust is about Lorelei performatively reading. She doesn't read past the first sentence of Swan's Way. But um, what was interesting about that is that it got me thinking about Arthur Miller and the relationship that Marilyn has with, rumored to have with JFK. We've talked about this really only exists in popular mythology. We don't have great evidence for this as far as we can tell. But I was trying to see, when she reads Ulysses and when she reads the Miller text, if there's some sort of Odyssean element that connects the two, but really one's deflationary, the other's inflationary. And but I think where the connection might exist is in the name. She marries Arthur. Arthur. Like, and it's kind of like, oh, hello, and this is important because we've talked about Marilyn being um the Penelope figure, the lunar figure, and I guess in this sense she might be the Guinevere figure. And then because we've also looked at Camelot and JFK's secret code name being Lancer, I don't know if this sets up Arthur Miller to be the King Arthur figure and JFK to be the Lancer figure, or they're like, or JFK's Lancer and King Arthur. I'm not exactly sure, but it is interesting to me that we see a man named Lancelot and a man named Arthur sharing the lunar figure, which one could argue is Guinevere. It points to the dispute over Guinevere between Lancelot and Arthur in Arthurian legend, and which ultimately causes the wasteland to come upon the domain of Arthur. So it was, we looked at this in a million different ways, and that's been staring me in front of my face. And I just now was like, oh, his name was Arthur. Of course, he's part of this little mythologum that is expressing itself in our reality.
I really buy that interpretation. It makes a
You
ton of
do?
sense. Yeah, I was thinking it as
Why?
well
Why do you buy that? Why do you buy that?
because I was thinking it too. No, because, well, I mean, you have these separate, myth isn't the right word, stories of
Hmm.
JFK having that nickname that you brought up like before we got back into the King Arthur lore. And it just maps
Yeah.
over so tightly with Guinevere kind of being this divisive figure in the King
Yeah.
Arthur story. It makes sense. It fits. It fits. The names are there. I really enjoyed Excalibur. I don't think it's a bad movie.
I it was a little cheesy. It was a little cheesy. But what's been
Remember
so
when it
great
came
about,
out, like that was kind of the aesthetic of a lot of movies. I think it's really
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
I thought it was very
Well, yeah,
enjoyable.
it was 1981,
I did fall
and
asleep at the
I,
end, but that's because it was late.
yeah, I will say that having done all this analysis of archetypes, it's very clear to see some of the it's very clear that Merlin is a Mercury, devil,
Mhm.
Lucifer figure, right? And that's so fascinating. I've never really heard outside of Jung talk about it. I never really. I always thought Merlin was kind of a good guy or something, but no,
Well,
he's like,
this is a whole can of worms.
yeah,
Is it evil or not evil to manipulate the material plane? I think is
Right.
a bigger question. You
Well,
can
and that
and you have these weird overlaps with the Luciferian archetype that gets collapsed into the feminine archetype, which is kind of chaos, of course, but also lunar in that, like, the material body, the body versus the spiritual ephemeral isn't necessarily evil, but there's also so much variety in these myths and what these myths contain. I it's not so clean cut for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah,
That
no, it's
Merlin's
not clean
bad.
cut. I mean, but what's so interesting, and we noticed in watching Excalibur, like there seems to be like Merlin is like a creature. Merlin is like kind of a god on earth. Maybe you could say that he was like a Nephilim or something like that. Um, because of the Christianizing element that is taking place in one of the things, one of the potential virtues, depending on who you ask about the Excalibur movie, is you start to see it's kind of encapsulates the blended pagan and Christian elements, and
Mhm.
Merlin is like opining at certain points. So he's like, the time of men is here, which is a
Right.
very interesting way to understand what Christ does to the pagan world. like like Merlin starts to withdraw. It's like, yeah, it's time for man, which I guess means like when Christ came in some way from this perspective of Arthurian legend, that you're going to see this recession of pagan deities or pagan demigods or half creatures or whatever they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I it's interesting. I think it's messy, but it was very fascinating that self-awareness and identifying of the time of interacting with reality in this way. That's kind of more how I perceived it. Because they
Mm,
present Merlin in human form. It
yeah.
it's more like this way of being is not that's not what this realm is about anymore. It's time for a new way of, I guess, unifying with the
Yep.
spirit and matter
Yep.
versus,
Yep.
and the Merlin approach is much more controlling. There's like weird prices to be paid at all
Oh yeah.
times.
There's tons of bargains, tons of
Yes.
devilish bargains that are made.
Right, versus just the, like, self-actualization and unification with God through the body temple, which is a less controlling mode of magic, but arguably a more powerful mode of magic, but they're different things.
Yeah. Agreed. But we're going to go deeper into King Arthur. So the next couple slides are about that because
Cool.
I can't just leave it at the synchronicity, but I found some interesting things that connect back to our previous explorations of Camelot and JFK.
Also, though, there were so many swans in Gilmore Girls, it won't
The,
stop. They just keep showing
well,
swans.
there are a lot of swans in Gilmore Girls.
It's so
I
interesting.
there's some theories that one of the writers had like a traumatizing experience with swans, but I think there's something
Yeah,
deeper going on
it
there.
feels symbolic to me.
All right, so check this out. This blew my mind as I was going deeper into um, the King Arthur stuff. So we talked about this last time. I had Jordan read it. Less than was this December 4th, 1963? Okay, December 4th, 1963. Jackie, with the help, or what I think happens, she summoned this man named Theodore H. White. Theodore H. White was a journalist, wrote for Life magazine. He also wrote a book on JFK called The Making of the President from 1960. Okay. She summons him to do an epilogue in Life magazine, which we talked about in terms of it demonstrated JFK's heroic man theory of history by the reference to Churchill in the Marlborough text. And also, she goes on and on about how he loved Arthurian legend. And she quotes the song that apparently Jack loved so much from the Camelot musical that was going on in the early 60s, which I guess they had seen. And this is where the whole Camelot mythology comes from. So I was digging deeper into it. What version of the Arthurian legend is Camelot based on? I thought, oh, sure, it's from Mallory. No, no, it's not. It's from this book called The Once and Future King. Look, do you ladies see who wrote The Once and Future King? A man named T.H. White. Okay? A man named T.H. White wrote The Once and Future King. Who does Jackie summon to write the epilogue where she talks about King Arthur and Camelot and Jack being part of it? A man named Theodore H. White. So the article itself contains two references to men, one directly, one indirectly, that have the same name. And if you and I couldn't believe this. I was like, well, who's T.H. White and who's the Once and Future King book that he wrote? Look when he was born, May 29th. That's JFK's birthday. So JFK's presidency is associated with Camelot, which he got from a play that is based off of a book called The Once and Future King by T.H. White, who he shares a birthday with. And then the epilogue of his life that codifies him as the Camelot King is then written by another T.H. White. It is like we have found some sort of circulatory loop here, okay? Like circling around this. And not to mention, I've talked about these return pressures that are, you can't blame people for thinking that JFK is still alive or who did or survived the assassin, because what is the book that this is all based on? The Once and Future King. Yes, Arthur gets mortally wounded. Yes, he dies. That's not the end of the story. That's not the end of the story in Arthurian legend. He is taken to Avalon. He is healed. He is restored, and everyone is waiting for him to come back. So I don't know. Is this like the universe making a wink? Like, I'm going to have the guy who wrote the book called The Once and Future King telling you, don't be sad, he'll be back. Now, I don't even know what that means. What does that even mean? Does that mean he's going to be back in the form of a son? Well, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Like the archetype is going to descend from a transcendental realm and situate itself on top of Donald Trump as some sort of solar figure, just like JFK was? What are we talking about? But I don't know. I mean, Kelly, I told Jordan about this like yesterday. What do you think? I just laid this out here. What do you think? If I showed this, what are we looking at here?
I don't know, but it's not to inject Jesus into it, but it's giving Jesus vibes.
Well, yeah, we've talked about the Christic imagery associated with JFK as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's there's a lot of solar imagery, the Son of God, the sun, right? Like we celebrate his birthday during a solstice.
Yeah.
Like,
it's it's startlingly coincidental, these two T.H. Whites.
I mean, if I showed this, I try to think, because I'm like, maybe one day, like some normal person will like watch some of my stuff. Or if I just like went up to a normal person, like, I don't know. Would any of this be like compelling to any of them being like, hey, maybe reality isn't what we were told?
I mean,
or would they just go, yeah, it's a lot of coincidences?
Ideally, I mean, what's a normal person? It depends on where they're at and what they've studied or been interested in and what synchronicities they've had up to this point. I can't really say, but to me, it's seems pretty profound.
What does it make you think? You're more sympathetic, right? Like we all sort of met under similar circumstances, like traveling in the same circles. Like you see something like this, and I don't think anyone has ever picked this out, right? I mean, what do you think when you see it? Is it proof to you that like archetypes are real? Like, are you like, oh, there's like some secret cabal scripting reality, like even down to like Jackie being in on it and summoning the writer who shares the name with the book about Arthur? Like,
Well,
What does it make you think?
I don't think any of that is outside the realm of possibility. I feel like the more I look into these coincidences, the more I find and the more almost ridiculous they are. That how could you not wonder with all of this evidence in front of you? I know that I now am going to read that book. Very interested in
The once
seeing
the once and future
yeah.
king.
And I haven't watched
It's
Excalibur
I have
either, so that's just bumped up to the top of my watch list.
well, I think the once I found it on Audible. I think it's like 33 hours long, which that's interesting too. But yeah, it's not a short book, from what I understand. And there's like how much I think about this, like how much King Arthur do I really need to know? Like, do I just read the Mallory? I'm trying to work through Weston's Ritual to Romance right now. Like, it's like I have to know like everything to do this. It's like crazy. There you go.
I think the King Arthur stuff is fun. I'm not in a rush. There's so much of it, and there's so many different iterations. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think I have to go back and rewatch The Mists of Avalon now too. My list just keeps getting longer and longer.
What's The Mists of Avalon?
It's a movie that's based on the book The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. And it's the Arthurian story. And yeah, with Merlin and Camelot and the women of Avalon. So I might find
I try to think
something
about
that I hadn't seen before in the threads of.
I hear you. Yeah, maybe I'll check that out too. I have a feeling I'm going to be pretty obsessed with this going forward. Let's go to the next slide if we can, Jordan. Great insights there, ladies. Okay, so, oh boy. So I know like a normal or like a smart person or like other PhD people would be like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? Like, you can't just be like linking Nexus State birthdays and be like, see, T.H. White writes the Arthur book and he has the same birthday as JFK. This is a phenomenon we keep tripping over in this work, right? JFK dies on 11/22/63. And this gets into the Christic elements because he dies with two other individuals that have different transcendent views of reality. We have Huxley, who dies the same day as JFK, and we have C.S. Lewis, who dies the same day as JFK. And they're all about some form of transcendence, one through outer space, another through drugs, another through Christ. So it's almost like this these thieves on the cross, right? Which one are they going to choose? It's interesting that C.S. Lewis does like the whole space trilogy thing too. So we see those connections. And then because Huxley is born on 7/26, this is part of this Nexus State that gets potentially a Merlin figure with Stanley Kubrick involved in all of this with his movie magic, if you want to believe that he's responsible for any of the images that we see put on the news. And then obviously Carl Jung, which Kubrick was very sensitive to, that he shared that birthday with Carl Jung. And we could talk about these Nexus states through sort of the vague. I'm not completely satisfied with the way that Jung talks about astrology in his book on synchronicity, but there are other individuals who really do think that there are characteristics of a higher reality that are puncturing our temporal timeline through different date nexuses, right? And one could argue that this is particularly happening during birthdays, right? And death days, as I've pointed out here. And some of the if we were ever to build, I guess, what we would call like a holographic map, right? I had ChatGPT like, who would I look into, right, for this? One answer that comes up over and over again is Richard Tarnas's archetypal historiography, David Bohm's implicate versus explicate order, Stanislav Grof, who I've talked about some with Sean Kelly, the holotropic research and coax systems, the aforementioned Carl Jung, Strauss and Howe's generational saculums, which I read this, I guess, back in 2016, The Fourth Turning, which is interesting. Someone that Jordan has pressed upon me is Michael Talbot with his holographic universe, and Carl Jim Kalaman, the quantum holographic evolution, which I don't know anything about. But I guess what I'm pointing out here, there are other serious thinkers who have taken these nexus dates seriously. It's not just like, oh, Luke, stop finding patterns. There are people who be like, who, like me, are saying, no, the pattern is real, and have tried to explain it in their different ways. And I have this list here. I can't say I'm super familiar with much of what they have to say here, but I've listed some of their texts. And at some point, I'm going to have to deal with this. This is just like for future research.
Yeah. I feel like Talbot's maybe the most accessible. He's rehashing a lot of Bohm and some other physicists. Yeah, this is a great list. Of course, Richard Tarnas, I think, is fairly accessible as well. I think he writes pretty straightforwardly, and you don't have to do quantum physics to understand it. But yeah, some of this is pretty dense. And the more I get into the Marie von Franz and the what's his name? Starts with an Iliad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that maybe he does speak so directly about the hologram, but his exploration of time is such a central concept to all of this.
It is.
I'm obsessed with time. But
Kelly,
also
were you
not.
familiar with? Yeah.
I don't like
That's
knowing
okay.
what time it is, but I'm interested in the concept of time.
Yeah. I don't think that's a paradox. I think you're allowed to think that. Kelly, are you familiar with any of these thinkers, or do you have any insights on how you understand birthday and death day nexus dates?
Not really. Not nothing profound to share right here, right now. I'm
That's
very
okay.
interested in time as well. And just in looking at the slide, the Richard Harness, I lean towards the planetary cycle does act as a clock in a way. And all of this looks like something that falls in line with my thinking, although besides Carl Jung, I'm not really familiar with any of the other theorists.
Well, I'll tell you, when I, because it could take some time to figure out this whole, the theory behind these nexus states. I was like, it would be like kind of a pretty cool, like, because it's kind of fun. It's like a scavenger hunt, like trying to find all the birthday, death day connections and the world historical events, etc. Like there would be a way to make kind of an alchemical nexus date website or something like that, so people could pull it up. The July 26th one, in the July 26th one's going to connect back to Excalibur, which I really haven't thought about a lot in this. It is interesting that Arthur's sister, is it Morgana? Is that how you say her name? She goes by different. She's played by Helen Mirren in the 1981 Excalibur, and I've come to, when you see Helen Mirren in something, that's kind of, you got to pay attention, because she's a 726er. She's born on 726, and that kind of, she's got some sort of alchemical. There's something about this birthday that follows these people around. For instance, she's the voice of the computer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that gives the answer that to the universe being 42. In the sequel to 2001, I think she is Captain Kerbuck. Okay, so she takes control, right? And Captain Kerbuck is clearly a reference to Captain Kubrick, right? And they're 726ers. It's just, and I think the guy who's the director of 2010, I forget his name, he's a 726er too. So like the guy who makes the sequel to 2001 I don't know what's going on with this birthday. It's important. So it's a Leo sign, I guess. I don't know my astrology, but there's something about it. Hey, and we're back. Jordan, could you progress to the next slide, please? We're finally going to talk about the Golden
Yes.
Bough information, which we usually start things off with. I probably should have done that, but if you stuck around for so long, we're going to kind of speed run these last 4 sections. I think I can kind of communicate what's going on there pretty quickly. It's always a struggle to try to see it in my mind and then distill it here in a simplistic fashion. But last time we looked at carrying the death and the carnival festivals in various parts of the world. And this time we are going to be looking at Russia and Slavic regions, but also India in 2 sections from here. But the first one is called Death and Resurrection of Kostrobunka. And this is a type of deity or god with a small g that is in Easter, which is in Little Russia, I guess. And there's lots of different permutations around these Slavic landscapes of these types of figures. You have Kostrobunko, Kupalo, Kostroma, Lada, Urillo. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of all of these, but there all seem to be these vegetation figures that have it. Their time has come. They need to be destroyed so the vegetative spirit can be liberated and then ultimately put back, and we can have this cycle of spring and summer and winter go over and over again, so that people who are tied to the land benefit from these rituals that are being done. And with Kostrobunko, like, it happens during Eastertide. One of the things that happens during these ritual, a girl lies dead and these singers encircle her. It's a symbolic death, and then she like rises up suddenly, so she has this resurrection, as if the spring is the resurrection, and she's coming back to life and the land is coming back to life. That's a big theme, right, in the King Arthur stuff, which was sort of surprising out of the gate when we were looking at that, and it's really expounded upon with Jesse Weston, is how much it's emphasized in the Excalibur movie that the king is tied to the land. Like, that makes so much more sense now that we've done the Golden Bough. I think it really pops in some way that it wouldn't have ever popped to me had I not, like, why is the king tied to the land? And there's like, we can look at different versions of this. I have a photo here of I don't believe Frazer names this particular one. I don't know if you can zoom in on it a little bit, Jordan. But another one in this region. It's hard to find images um, of these different rites and rituals, even in 2026. Not everything is online, and you could argue I could have done a deeper dive into it and not be so preoccupied with the space program. But here is one that I was able to find off, I believe, Twitter, from an account called Faces of Ancient Europe, and it had different permutations of it. This is the drowning of Marina, right? Which is a lot like any of these other ones that we looked at. But you can see these young girls carrying her there, and they're going to ritualistically kill this effigy, right? Usually in fire and water, sometimes both. We looked at a image from Poland last time. And he had, in this particular account, he had several different examples of this, but I thought this was a particularly stunning photograph. And we could go to the next one to kind of explain some of the emotional phenomenon that are associated with this. And this is a different figure that is burned, Maslenitsa, okay? It's a Slavic tradition as well. There are all these different, I think 2 presentations ago, I was pondering about why these rites and rituals are happening and what it means. Because like everybody knows they're not really killing their king anymore. They're killing these effigies. So it's like it's play acting, right? And so I set up this scenario where people were doing this back in the day. And um, if the JFK assassination was somehow connected to this at all, it's a different situation because there's asymmetric knowledge of what's going on. So, and there's like people who are just play acting, and then there are people who may be play acting, and other people are understanding it to be real in the real sense. If it in fact is this killing of the king ritual, which I'm not sold on, but I understand why people have come to that conclusion. The third rail to look at this is there's great solemnity and deep emotion attached to the ritual and play acting that is going on within these communities that Frazer is documenting. And it's a mixture of feeling. So they may be having they're having funerals for these effigies and these figures. And sometimes there's joy associated with these funerals. Sometimes there's mourning. Sometimes there's hostility. And then they go and they kill the effigy, they burn it, they drown it, they do all these different things, and even revival in some rites. But the idea here is that ultimately there are negative. They're ultimately interested in preserving that vegetative spirit so that it reincarnates in the proper vessel, right? And it comes back and benefits the people who are tied to the land. But if that vegetative spirit is in a particular vessel, let's say the effigy as it is when they're before they burn it or drown it or whatever, they actually think there might be something infectious about it, that they might actually, if they don't handle it the right way, like death and pestilence may be visited upon the community or certain individuals. And so that they have to do these rites with great seriousness to make sure it doesn't attach to them. And that's also like part of the reason why they're so interested in expelling it and why there's joy associated with getting rid of this vegetative spirit. It's not that they hate the vegetative spirit. They understand that it is dangerous in some forms and are excited about welcoming it back in others. This wind is really kicking up. Anyway, so that is what that slide is about. Now, what Frazer notices that this is going on in India. This is not just Europe. If we go to the next slide, this is the and usually we have Ostic here. I was hoping that he would have a chance to talk about this. Can you go to the next slide, Jordan? There we go. This is analogous. This is section 8, analogous rights in India. So this is not purely a European phenomenon. This is also going on in India. There is an Indian rite called Rali Kamela. I'm probably not pronouncing this right. Ostic will correct me next time, but it seems to have different vegetation markers where they take these figures of Shiva and Parvati images, associate them with fertility, with vegetation markers like branches and flowers and things like that. They have a ceremonial wedding of these idols, and then they drown them in the river. And the girls are the ones largely carrying this out. And they believe that somehow this is going to result, when they are resurrected, in them finding husbands and mates. And you can see that this is sort of analogous to what's going on in the Slavic, the Russian, the European communities, where you have Urilla, Kostroma, Kupalo, and other death figures who may be manifested with straw effigies, May trees, and green boughs. And also we have the May King and Queen that we've talked about very early on, that then are also drowned, buried, or burned. Oftentimes this is carried out by women, children, girls, and there's lots of lamentation. But ultimately, this is about ensuring the fertility of the crops. So again, and this is where the Jungian archetypal theory comes in. How can we account for all these disparate rituals in these different parts of the world?
Kelly, do you have a unifying theory for us?
Not at this time, but I do see how it seems to be globally universal with its own spin in every different tradition. So
I have to say, Ostic was the one who provided these images. I don't know where he got them from, but apparently he's like, this is because he lives amongst these rituals in northern India, and he's like, no, this is what they look like. Especially I think these clay ones here, you can see they're much more crude than the more polished ones that are here on the bottom. So we have one more section from the Golden Bough that we'll take a look at, which I think is particularly interesting from a theoretical perspective. And I've got not images from the Golden Bough, but obviously I've got here Kennedy with his moon speech and Earth Day and the vegetation spirit. If I can try to summarize what Frazer is saying in this particular section, he kind of opines about how this could be happening psychologically, sociologically, and philosophically. But it really comes down to if I can get this right, I think it comes down to the limited lifespan of people back then. They did not have developed science because really they had not lived long enough to see the to grasp the laws of nature. And so when they were doing these rites and rituals, they did not necessarily think that they were doing performative magic as we would understand, or ritualistic magic. They thought they were doing a type of precursor to science. I don't know if they would call it that, but because they did not have I think Frazer's theory is because they had not lived long enough and did not have enough learning and enough communal knowledge to draw upon, they saw that their rites and rituals were syncretized to the seasons, and they actually thought that they were bringing in the summer, they were bringing in the spring, that they were bringing these rainy systems and stuff like that in when they have such limited data sets. And I guess you hit on it enough, right? And you ignore the anomalies, you start to think that you've actually got some sort of science here that helps makes your crops grow before you start taking things into consideration, like, whatever farmers use today, whatever agricultural science they use today in order to make sure that their crops are great, which we may see at some point in the future as a type of ritualistic magic as well, which, it gets into interesting like gray areas when you get like a copy of Old Farmer's Almanac. It's got like astrology and stuff like that in it. So it's pretty fascinating. But I think that's kind of the idea. And one of the other interesting things that Frazer hints at, and I believe, although it is snowing here now. We were just talking about it is now snowing. This is crazy. We were talking about this, and Frazer talks about this a little bit. Sorry, the weather conditions here are very strange, and he talks about how we do not understand the basis of these rites and rituals. They seem like this like harmless sort of play acting, but really when you get down to it, it's connected to all these presuppositions about primitive science. And I think, at least from what we've read so far, one can infer what he is saying, that perhaps the dramatic arts are derived from these rituals. And I think that is something that Weston is going to develop. And that's kind of a fascinating idea. I had not really thought about that. Like, where does acting come from? Where does theater come from? Where do movies come from? And we talk about, movie magic and the archetypes and why certain scripts work and things like that, and to make a compelling movie. Because in a faint, distant past, these were proto-scientific magical rituals that our ancestors used because they believed they were helping or controlling the environment. Frazer does not say that. Weston does not come out and say that entirely. But I think that might be what we're looking at. Because you think about this, even literature, I used to think like, we've had literature forever. And then you start thinking about it, it's like, the novel is kind of a new thing. It's kind of a product of modernity. It's not really as old as you think it is. And you go, well, why? Why? Because people were preoccupied with other ways of making sense of their reality, and they didn't read books about it. They didn't watch movies about it. They acted it out. They lived it. They took their effigies and destroyed them. And before that, they did even more gruesome things. So I just find that to be a fascinating point that I think should be developed further. And I think it's especially important when we talk about JFK as being like the first like TV president, right? And how he inaugurates our understanding of reality through television, especially through the Apollo missions. And, I play with this idea, is in some way, if we take that seriously, are we talking about the Apollo missions being like this rite of spring that is about bringing in this ecological harvest? I think there are reasons. I can understand why someone would take that to its logical conclusion. I don't think Downard or Hoffman does that, from what I can understand. But I could see if they had sort of grasped that, they would have taken it to that conclusion. I think I think there might be a different way to look at this, as I've maintained throughout, that there's a baseline archetypal grammar that is just part of the construction of our simulation to begin with. So I'll pause there for a second and let you two commentate.
Well, the only thing that struck me that I wanted to say was when you were asking, where do films come from? Where does movies come from? And in my mind, I went back to the time before I was around, but when nobody had those in their house. And I think there is an aspect of that technology coming to everyone that maybe was meant to influence or infiltrate people's thoughts and their psyches. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jordan, what did you think about this material?
Hmm. It's kind of all tied up in the time stuff too. So I just got done listening to Christian's latest podcast, and she was talking about the different calendars and how time is used as this synchronizing tool so that you can organize masses of people in ways that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And Kelly, what you said, I think, plays into that as well. If we have everyone looking at the same media, then we can more or less like imprint everyone with the same experiences, and it would be easier to predict or nudge people and understands what they might do and what their psychology is made up of, rather than a more spontaneous, decentralized mode of interacting with the world. And even just observing myself recently, I got back into video games, but how much of that is like, I don't know, it's interesting. I'm kind of evaluating my own psyche and what is and is not appealing to me, and where, like, what is hmm. There's so many games now, like Animal Crossing would be an example, that I'm not very interested in playing, that are mostly emulating these social situations and playing out these stories and like making clothes and doing basically exactly what most is accessible to most people in day-to-day life, just in a little more fantastical way, versus like some games that are more akin, I think, to reading King Arthur legends, which is not something that is accessible to people necessarily day to day outside of their imagination. But you could write yourself or do things like that.
That
So
there has to be a King Arthur video game. Someone needs to
yeah,
get
I'm
on
sure
that.
there are. I'll look into it because I was thinking that today. I mean, obviously, there's a ton that are influenced by, and these archetypes of the return of the king is textbook lore in pretty much every single franchise. Harry Potter is the return of a dominant wizard. Lord of the Rings, literally, return of Aragorn, return of the king, and the coming of the time of man and the ending of the time of the immortals is copy paste in both of them.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you said something very profound there, Jordan. It anticipates the next slide if we could go to that.
Okay.
So, I was just like, I journal. I have a lot of conversations with. I use 3 different LLMs at this point for different purposes, and yeah, which one are we at? Yeah, that's the one. So I was just like, what are we looking at here? I was like, I really want to lay out the different ways that we can interpret all this scripting, because you can look at the Kennedy assassination and the Apollo missions and the ecological movement and say, oh, come on, this maps out pretty well with these effigies that are destroyed in order to bring back spring. It's happening all over the world, and it's over a larger scale of time. You can see, like I mentioned earlier, why Downard and Hoffman would think that the killing of the king ritual is going on here, because it does seem to match the movement. And I was just throwing things at the wall. You know, is this an esoteric elite ritual, and they know they have to do it because there's actually some juice to it, and it, like, if they're going to like hold society together, and they're actually like benevolent elites, and they have to do these things even if we don't understand them because we live in an enlightened, in air quotes, enlightened era. Is this something that is perhaps done in a post-Christian world, right, with the whole death of God, the whole Nietzschean death of God thing, where we need some sort of like societal cohesion. So let's inject solar mythology and dying and rising gods into the public consciousness. The theory that I think has the most powerful explanation because it can explain why it pops up in India and on islands that are cut off from the rest of the world with no elite programming, right? Is this archetypal grammar thing that's just naturally emergent. And then there is a little bit of retrospective like pattern selection. Things are so many things that we've looked at here are not were not obvious to people at the time, but then when you look back, you start, oh, okay, like that. Now I think we've developed enough skill here to be like, oh, wait, something is emerging, and I'm trying to be a little bit more thinking with it in terms of seeing the solar aspect with Trump and seeing the stuff going on with Orion. If you can go to the next slide, Jordan, I think the thing that you were talking about is kind of like this fabricated societal myth. And I asked Chad, I was like, okay, like how do you see these, like if you could rank them, like what do you think is like the best like explanation? And it tended to agree with me that the archetypal grammar thing was the foundational thing. But then it is also possible, like we've talked variety, like it's just sort of a naturally occurring phenomenon. We can have great philosophical conversations about why that is happening, right? If it's part of just the evolution of man and consciousness, and it got passed on through Darwinism or something else. It seems to me to be woven into material reality itself, but that's a whole other conversation. But then there could be that the fact that there is this knowledge of this archetypal grammar, consciously or unconsciously, that the different institutions could reach out to this and try to stabilize society through it. This retrospective selection thing could also be in the mix. And perhaps as like other like overlays, you might even say that there could be some elite intentionality to it. But what's foundational to it all is the emergent archetypal grammar. We could possibly debate what is the second, third, fourth layer to all of this, but at least in my conversations with chat, and perhaps it's like there to steer me away from those conspiring elites. It tends to think that the best explanation is this emergent archetypal grammar.
Well, that makes sense since it's your journal.
It is. Well, yeah, it's reflecting back. It's mirroring to me. But I mean, I'm having enough personal experiences where I'm just like, there's no Illuminati doing this to me,
Yeah,
Like
I
there's no
agree.
one, there's no one rewriting the Gilmore Girls with events from my day in it,
They're not putting Stargate rings on the car windshield.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gosh, I am going to get. What does it take to get institutionalized? Because I have left too much of a video trail here.
Oh.
You guys are going to have to show up at my institutionalization trial and be like, he's not
I'll pull
crazy.
it together for that.
Yeah, the girl who dresses up as the riderless horse is his defense.
Yeah. I'll dress up to go. I'll wear a tiara.
And Jackie,
I'll come like this.
all these people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for the record, could you state your name? Yes, I'm Jackie O. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we all go down together. Yeah, so that's I thought that was kind of interesting. I think we've got 4 more slides. 4 more slides. So if we want to go 6:32, but if you want to pause and hang out on this and talk about the implications, we can as well.
I'm fine with moving on.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, really, I'm a broken record. Blended model. That's
Blended
what
model.
I think is going on. Different things are happening at different layers of reality. Some people are conscious of it and leaning into it. Some people are unconscious of it and getting swept up into it. And I think perpetuating it in ways that they may not personally be aware of. But nonetheless, there's things beyond human intervention happening. And then there's humans being humans. And then maybe Fae being Fae, because Morgana is also called like a Fae figure, right? So I think that gives us a little more clue into what Merlin is and what she is.
Okay.
Okay.
So, okay. This was just um we have talked ad infinitum about the blue marble photograph as perhaps being at least an image of the philosopher's stone. And I was it was brought to my this is like very entry level truther stuff, but when you start getting into like flat earth and things, people go, "Oh, look at all the images of the blue marble. They're completely photoshopped." And NASA even admits this. The especially with the ones that came out in like 2002, 2012, they're photoshopped because they have to be, right? These are not, we're not on the moon. We can't take whole photographs like we did before. So we have to use these satellites and stitch them together. And, if you catch anomalies in them, like copy and paste tools or replicated clouds, that's to be expected. There's human error in putting together this image of Earth, but we have real ones. We have real ones. So don't get too wrapped around the axle about it. But something that was pointed out, I believe, in this 2015 version, where I have this guy pointing to, is that if you rotate the blue marble, um, you see that it you see, depending on how you want to understand what is going on here, that the word sex is in the clouds. Now, people who want to defend this image say, well, that's pareidolia or whatever it's called. You're seeing, it's like when you look at when you're laying down and looking at the clouds and you see a bunny rabbit, but there's not really a bunny rabbit there, something like that. And then there are other people being like, hey, this is like kind of like revelation of the method. This is a karmic tell. Like what you're looking at here is someone who's trying to like whistleblow or something like that and be like, hey, this is like not real. But one of the things I think is interesting about it is like you could put all sorts of words in the clouds. You could put help me, they're forcing me to make composite images of the earth, or whatever, right? Or like you could have put the word fake, or I don't, you do all sorts of things you could put there. You could put the initials of the guy who made it. There's actually a guy, NPR interviewed the guy who made it. He could put his initials in it and be, see, I can do whatever I want. But they use the word sex. And I find that that's interesting given how much of the symbolic analysis that we have done of outer space is about sex. And really the creation of the philosopher's stone, like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this program, is about the alchemical union of solar and lunar. And I wonder if this is another confirmation and pointing us to the sexual space conception of the philosopher's stone, which it's looking like is somehow connected to Orion. So I don't have much more to say about this than that. It was interesting to go and put a chart together of all these different blue marbles. The first I was going into this. I was like, I found it interesting because you remember the old iPhones had a blue marble like standard, and I thought there was like maybe something symbolically interesting about having a globe on an Apple iPhone, like symbolically, like in terms of like knowledge and but there's been they had the first single photo we've talked about is from 1972, Apollo 17, and then everything in between. They had a 2000 blue marble, 2002, 2005, and 2012. Those were all composites. So any image of the Earth that you found during those times were all composites, all CGI composites. Or I shouldn't say that. That's what they're all composites. And then it wasn't until about 10 years ago that they produced another single photo. And I guess now they've got the Epic satellite out there that's supposedly just taking pictures of the Earth all the time. But, we had like 30, 40 plus years of no actual photos of the Earth. Whole photos. Crazy. But now we get them all the time. So it's problem solved.
I just saw just seeing Discover like this, put this in my head, the bank credit card company Discover. I think they
Mhm.
have like an orange ball
Yeah.
in the O in their logo that looks like
Mhm.
the sun to me.
Yep. Yep.
You're
Probably.
like, I know. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, they have it. MasterCard has the Vesica Pisces, right? It
Right.
has the two
The
circles.
two.
So
Or potentially
every
the second sun.
yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
Or the sun and
So
Mars. Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
It's the appropriate color.
so not super deep, just kind of for there's so many different archetypal and symbolic threads that we've been building. I just I would is this the best piece of evidence in the world? I'd say no, not by itself. But with everything else, I think it makes the case a little stronger.
Well, it's spilling into my Super Mario time because I'm playing Super Mario Odyssey, and you collect moons, and there's moon rocks throughout the whole game that you realize when you get to the moon, oh, like there's supposed to be rocks that I guess came off of the moon and fell to Earth and all these different places. And
Yeah.
you battle bunnies, the lunar rabbits. You can catch rabbits to get moons. And then they have the fertility ritual. Bowser's wedding to Peach, Princess Peach, happens on the moon. So they're really following all of this. And you see from your spaceship too, you see like the earth behind it, like the blue marble. You see Nintendo's rendering of the
Yeah,
composite earth.
we all just live in a GameCube game.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
goofy.
someone Japan was showing images of the Earth, and like they're like, oh, Japan just sent us like pictures of like Earthrise, and it's like so, and in the title, someone put in the caption, definitely not CGI or like AI or something like that, and all the people underneath it were like, what? Like, and someone said underneath it, they're like, we live in a Nintendo game. It's like so bad, and it's undeniable. Yeah, it's undeniable. All right, got a couple more slides here. Let's because I need some lunch. I'm feeling it. Okay, so this was one of the more fascinating discoveries that I made this week. So I was like, where did this whole Gaia hypothesis even come from? Like, what's its history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was digging into it. It actually comes from this engineer that worked for NASA named James Lovelock. James Lovelock, I believe he was working on the Mars Viking program, and he started to come up with this, looking at the data, the images, the data. He started to come up with this idea that the Earth was this self-regulating system, that it seemed to have checks and balances, and he was going to give it some very mathematical name, right? And he lived right next door to the acclaimed writer William Golding. Well, who is William Golding? William Golding wrote, which we all read, I think, at some point in our secondary education, Lord of the Flies. I don't know much about William Golding. I read this when I was like in 10th grade, but generally he deals with themes about man being kind of a blight upon the face of the earth. Okay, like that he is a corrupted organism. There, I'm not some expert in his writing, but I think that's kind of the idea, that like man is not this angel, which with the children on the island, I think is one of the conclusions that we're supposed to come to, that civilization breaks down really quickly and they end up being returned to the savage state. Anywho, he suggested, don't give it some sort of technical name, call it the Gaia hypothesis. She was like the earth goddess. So he's like, that's great. So this James Lovelock adopts from William Golding the Gaia hypothesis idea. Okay, so that's interesting on a lot of different levels, especially when we looked at the archetypal symbolism with the Orion capsule associated with Artemis and Gaia killing Orion with the scorpion. And Apollo is the program that gave us the image of Earth or Gaia. Okay. Now, what is so fascinating about this is the etymology of James Lovelock's name and his birthday, which is also his death day. He's one of these very rare individuals who dies on his birthday. Another very rare individual who dies on his birthday, William Shakespeare. And where did William Shakespeare perform his plays, ladies?
Right.
The Globe Theater. That's right. So it so there is something Ouroboros about being born and dying on your birthday, right? That's why I have the Ouroboros here. And there's something Ouroboros about the sort of self-regulating Gaia, the image of Earth. What day does James Lovelock
Live and die.
get born on and die on? Live and die. Oh, wouldn't you know? Wouldn't you know? It is July 26th, the same day as Aldous Huxley, as Carl Jung, as Stanley Kubrick, as Helen Mirren. Again, he is a 726er. And so there's all this sort of that we're taught about the collective unconscious from Carl Jung. We're talked about the infinity of space from Stanley Kubrick. And we're talked about the collective entity that is Gaia from James Lovelock. Not to mention his name is Lovelock. Like somehow we are all sort of locked into this love of Mother Earth, right? There's this, and we are locked into the circuit. We are locked into the cycle. That's what I'm seeing there. So, and this gets back into our conversations about the holographic map and birthdays and what it all means. But we're even coming full circle here because I started talking about birthdays and we're going to close out talking about birthdays. So I'll pause there. I think we might have one or two more slides. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about archery. So, do you guys want to say anything about this slide before I go to archery?
I think it's interesting that he died at age 103 because 10 take away 3 is 7, and then 1 doubled is 2, and 3 doubled is 6. So there's the 726 again.
Nice. That's good. That's good. That's good. I didn't realize you had such a gematria mind. I've not really cultivated my gematria mind. Are you into gematria?
I mean,
that was pretty good.
Not excessively, but sometimes things stand out.
I watch my Gematrinator. I watch my little Zach Hubbard every once in a while for my sport. I watch a lot of football, so like I'm interested in the gematria of like sports. I like that stuff.
And the plot thickens.
Jordan's like, yeah. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, the cyclical birthday death date. I'm not adding anything that hasn't been called out already, but that's pretty aggressive, very cyclical. I wonder too if we look into the locations, if there's any significance from that perspective, that lens, kind of taking a downward approach of looking, I forget the word he uses, but looking at this
mystical
symbolism.
topography, I believe.
Yeah.
Is something.
Or even the parallels and things like that.
The 33rd parallel, the lines of longitude and latitude.
Yeah, 22 is very significant to me personally, but yeah, I don't know. He seems very like joyful in this photo, which is fun. I don't know. There's like a light I feel like that's coming through him that I don't necessarily ID on all of these figures we look at. There's kind of a playfulness. So I don't know. I don't know what his bigger role here is, what he was aware of or not aware of. Obviously, Lord of the Flies is a really significant text for I think social programming. But
I need to go watch the movie again.
Yeah, it's so strange. All the things we had to read in school, and at the time, we were not aware of this alchemical language. We were picking up on symbolism, but I don't think zooming out now, a lot of it's a lot more on the nose than I think it felt at the time. But yeah, I don't know. It's super, super fun. This date just keeps on giving and giving and giving.
Yeah.
I wonder too if he's maybe the completion of a cycle of some sort, since he has the death date as well. Is that like the closing out of this energy that is the July 26th, or not? I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how this type of consciousness endures. I get the sense that we're going to be ushered into a new way of seeing the world. They
Mhm.
hit us hard as kids. I remember as a kid, like Kelly and I are roughly the same age, I think. Like we really got hit with a lot of environmental programming. Like I don't think like other previous generations. I like all the I don't know, did you watch like Captain Planet and all stuff like that? Or you might have been, I don't
No,
know. I don't want
I
to give away
don't
your
think I
age.
watched Captain Planet, but
Yeah.
I feel like where our generation was the first to sort of have the internet in young adulthood, that some of those things might have been prerequisites for kind of priming us for what was coming.
Were you an
Mhm.
early adopter of the internet? Because what's so strange about me is that like I hated computers and internet. I don't, I like, and now I'm like terminally online. I'm just like kind of curious if what you were like. No,
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
anyone who's online more than me. No.
I used MSN Messenger. That was the only internet I used for years just to talk to friends. I didn't really
Yeah,
use it for any other purpose until much later.
that's funny. Yeah, my professors in college were, because I was like, yeah, I don't do internet, and they would get like really they would get really upset with me, being like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't." Like, I went to college during a time where like I was doing everything. I hated technology. I didn't want it to be any more in my life than it already was, and now I am trying to merge with it. Good times. Okay. Okay, let's talk about archery. 2 slides. Okay. I mentioned last time and at the outset of this, there is archery all over this psychodrama that is history. So we have J. Robert Oppenheimer talking about becoming death, the destroyer of worlds. He is quoting Arjuna, who is the archer who is given this catastrophic weapon in the Bhagavad Gita, right? And then we have um, the modern descendant of the arrow, which is the missile, right? And JFK's presidency is really defined by the projectile, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis, which he, depending on how you want to understand that event, he exercised restraint, right? With a situation that could have gotten much worse. And then it ultimately launches the Saturn V rocket for the moonshot, right? And perhaps most uncanny of all this, I've got is that the first man on the moon. I've been looking at this puzzle for so long, and I just put it together like 2 weeks ago. Armstrong, right, which is going to be going back to the whole knights thing, because these were the individuals that helped the knights up on their horses, right? Which you could clearly see if JFK is a knight of the round table, that he would need an Armstrong to get back up on his horse. But also you need a strong arm to string the bow. And because I've made the argument that JFK is the solar Ulyssian figure, one of the things that uh, Odysseus is able to do with the help of Apollo is to string the bow, split the axe heads. I believe there are 12 axe heads, which gets into um, the zodiac and the pervasive nature of the number of 12, the 12 knights of the round table, the 12 astrological signs, the 12 moonwalkers, etc. That he has this relationship, the symbiotic relationship with Apollo, that allows him to string the bow. And so like perhaps there is a story here, like that human, like there is a, like, I don't know if it's like right to think about reality as like a machine with different levers and pulleys, like an assembly line. But like when you enter into it, when you get down that conveyor belt, it's going to impress certain sort of archetypal stories upon you. And one of this is this destructive arrow, the archer weapon. And we see it with the Trinity test. It's discovered, it's lamented, it's perhaps used unwisely with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. is that then we learn something about restraint through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then we know we don't shoot it at each other. Perhaps we use it to explore. We shoot it away from the Earth and not across the Earth when we go into outer space, right? So perhaps as we gain momentum and we fall into these different archetypal and mythological narratives. Now, if we go to the next slide, Jordan. I think the one before it. Why? Why is this happening? There's a lot that could be said about this. One could talk about it in terms of a non-coercive divine action, right? In terms of and perhaps this goes to the next, is archetypes as divine interface. Like this is the way that God and humanity interact with one another. That God is somehow allowing us to see him and his consistent system in our reality, right? Without robbing us of our free will, right? By being so blatant, I am God, grovel before me, do as I say, but allowing us for those of us to discern, to actually see the divine mechanics at work. Okay. And that these might be the mediating structures that we use in our relationship with God. And it is there in order to preserve free will and for us to have the appropriate recognition of them. And there's lots of different ways that we can think about this in terms of different thinkers. Yeah. In terms of the non-coercive divine action aspect of this, we might want to look at Augustine, Aquinas, and Simone Weil. And in terms of the divine interface of the archetypes, again, that's Jung, Eliade, and someone I've not read, Henri Corbin. Them being this story about the archer, it might also serve a pedagogical and a teleological purpose, right? And this might cause us to look at Aristotle, Aquinas, and MacIntyre. And, there's really different aspects that we're looking at that I'm perhaps replicating here. The different reasons for why this may be happening is that, talk about this as like participatory mythogenesis, right? Where humans unknowingly enact meaning larger than themselves. We don't understand it until way after the fact, right? So these are just some of the reasons I'm thinking that some of these stories keep replicating themselves out in modernity. And we can go deeper into this, but there's a lot of reading to be done here to possibly explain why this is happening. Jung himself does not seem, he's constantly going against philosophy and has negative things to say about philosophers. But I think this is kind of at the edge of what Jung was talking about, and we start getting into larger metaphysical issues. But I do like the idea that this allows God to be in our lives and us to participate with God without our lives being overdetermined by him. It's not a thought I had really considered. Thoughts?
It kind of reconciles. We talked a long time ago about the, how many arguments for free will versus against free will there are in the Bible, that I think kind of comes into play here. Of there's an overall architecture, and then how we choose to be the feet on the ground, can dramatically impact our experience with everything. But there are these kind of bigger grooves, if you will, that have been prepared for us, I suppose, that we get to shape, that do develop us and support our own consciousness expanding journey.
What do you think, Kelly?
I like what Jordan just shared. That sounds right to me. It resonates. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'll tell you what, this is all that I had prepared for today. So I'll let both of you have the last word. My voice is shredded, so I think I think I'm going to have to tap out. But if you don't have anything else to say, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, Kelly, as Jackie O. And I hope you come back for future iterations. So
Your
so
star power really
yeah,
is appreciated.
yeah. So with that, I'll let you two have the last word.
Well, I'll just say thank you so much for having me, and I would love to come back as often as I can. And thank you so much. I really appreciate all the details that you put into the slides, and it's so much information. Sometimes it's like you have to take a step back and just kind of chew on it and see how you feel about it. And I'm looking forward to where this leads me in the week ahead. So thank you both.
Excellent. Thank you, Jordan.
I think what I liked most about today is it's not the first time presently unfolding stuff has come up, but I feel like this presentation in particular really anchored me in the present and what's happening now in an interesting way. So, just a reminder for myself that what we're exploring is happening real time. And yes, we can watch movies or read books or play games or engage in all sorts of different consumptive media. Really, you can find all of these probably in your own individual day to day lived life, just going about and experiencing the world. And collectively, we're seeing some of these things play out on a huge world stage. I think
Yeah.
this is an interesting year. I think it's going to be much more kinetic than previous years with a lot of the patterns we've seen playing out.
I mean,
So,
just the past week. I mean, geez Louise.
yeah. And I don't know if that's just the larger cycles of time or if that's a purposeful intention to have things a little bit more kinetic than gaining
Well,
that potential energy. As people have been talking about cycles and fourth turning forever,
yeah.
forever. And perhaps it will still just be a slow unfolding, and those are myths to distract us and make us think. Just like, you have a lot of apocalyptic thinking, I think, in some Christian communities that displace us out of the present moment and more fixated on a potential future that may have already passed. Who knows? Um, I think it's a similar thing, perhaps, but I don't know. I'm excited to have a moon landing watch party
I
in my
know.
lifetime.
I finally get him.
Let's go.
Count me in.
uh, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's gonna
even
be
though,
wild.
we're using the Gregorian calendar, we can talk about that all day. But last year, 2025 is kind of a completion number. And in a lot of different systems, we have left a complete astrologically, if you look at the sky clock, we're leaving kind of the completion of a lot of cycles, although there's so many cycles. So it's, infinite parentheses, and some of these parentheses are getting closed and bracketed and new ones are always opening. But we are, at least through many systems, entering a newish period of the beginning of a new cycle. So I think we're going to start to see that play out a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see if the archetypal maps shift or not. I don't know.
It is dynamic. It is dynamic. I perhaps should mention. I've perhaps brought this up in other places, but Taylor Desjardins' work is going to be increasingly important to think about this stuff, and especially the
Mm,
noosphere and Gaia.
I don't think I've read any of him. So,
He's a Jesuit philosopher that
okay.
really influences a lot of the singularity talk, and uh, some of his famous works are like The Future and Phenomenon of Man. Those are
Mm.
the big one. But he had this idea of the noosphere, which fits pretty well with the whole Gaia thing. So
Yeah,
we'll
a
see.
lot of it's interesting because you kind of starts to see what schools of thought, the encoders, if you will, seem to be the most influenced by. These archetypes are pervasive, but for example, when I see the astrological encoding and symbolism put into things, it seems to nest a lot more with kind of the Crowley perspective, at least talking about Western media and all of that. And so that's an interesting call out, kind of a Jesuit scholar, I don't know. I think the deeper we get into this, Luke, the more I see, there's kind of different flavors and different clustering of these symbolic languages that perhaps you could call dialects. They're still hearkening on the same kind of universal structure, but there are these different dialects, either regionally or just these different pockets of groups that may not be geographically located in the same place, but they're kind of a similar consciousness or maybe a similar frequency. So that's really interesting to me right now.
Yeah.
You can be fluent in different people's archetypal dialects.
I think you have to be.
Yeah. Depends on your goals. I mean, if really you're just interested in your own development, I think you can leave all of that at the door and just experience your own life. But
no, I must know it all.
It's fascinating. It's very cool.
All right. I got to eat lunch.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Oh,
Usually
Kelly.
I'm the one wrapping it up.
Right.
We're finishing on time.
You can hit stop on the record.